For this video, I want to go over some mistakes that I feel I made with my beginner-friendly Betta fish tank so you can avoid making them in your own setups. So the first one and only real major mistake that I feel I made is overlooking potential signs of illness. This is Stitch the Betta fish, and as you can see, he's recently had tail rot, with the infection also causing problems with his back. He is doing a lot better now, even compared to just a week ago, so I am hoping he'll make a full recovery, but I do think I made a mistake with this one. I noticed a dark patch on his tail about a week before the actual hole formed, but I honestly thought he was just changing colour again. As you can see in these photographs, Stitch has the marble gene causing him to change colour, and I just presumed that it was changing again. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case, and it cost me a week of time that I could have been helping him fight off the infection. So yeah, lesson identified: try to double or even triple check any changes with the fish in the future with other people to get external opinions. Just so the rest of the video makes sense, I will be using some old B-roll from before the infection, so that's why Stitch's tail goes back to normal, then comes back to this a few times. The next mistake I think I made was with the Bucephalandra Red Scorpio in the tank, and this is pretty much melted away now, and it is a shame because I really wanted this plant. There are a few issues that could have caused this, but I honestly think that the main problem was the amount of glue that I used to secure the Bucephalandra to the rock. In hindsight, I think I did add too much glue, and that ended up covering up too much of the plant, preventing it from growing correctly, resulting in it melting. I'm not a big fan of using glue in aquariums anyway, so I am looking for another way to secure my epiphyte plants to the hardscape in the tank, but when I set this up I was still using glue. Another potential issue is the lighting that I'm using on this tank, as some types of Bucephalandra can do better in slightly higher lighting. This tank just runs on the stock light that came with it, so it has a low light output, and this may have played a role in the issue. That said, my Bucephalandra Sintang and the Bucephalandra Thea Green that I kept in this tank are both doing really well, and I'm really happy with their progress. But yeah, lesson identified. Moving forward, I do want to try and find a better, more efficient way of securing epiphytes to hardscape. So the next mistake that I think I made was using India Green Gnome as my Java Fern of choice for this tank, as it's had a couple of issues, and one of my friends has this same plant and he's had the exact same issues in his tank. As I mentioned in my July fish room tour, a bunch of the leaves on this plant had turned brown and they were starting to melt and fail. Back when I set this tank up, I was so close to getting Java Fern Trident instead, and looking back I honestly wish I did, but at the time I just preferred the colour of the India Green Gnome when I purchased all the plants for the tank. Now this is a naturally occurring type of Microsorum from southwestern India, rather than being a human cultivar created in a lab that can have problems. It is listed as being easy difficulty with a low light requirement and CO2 being optional, but in all honesty I just don't plan to use this again. As I mentioned earlier, this tank does run on a low powered stock light, but I've grown regular Java Fern latifolia and Java Fern Trident under similar lights without issue. Part of me does wonder if the decaying plant leaves may have contributed to the infection that Stitch ended up with too, but this tank does get regular water changes at least once every 2 weeks, usually once every week, so I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, lesson identified for this one. Moving forward I probably will stick with the more established and more popular types of Java Fern. So moving on, and we get to using a manual light on the tank rather than an automated one, and this isn't really a mistake in itself, it's more that I forget to turn the light off sometimes, so the tank has inconsistent photo periods. I am probably going to switch this light over to a cheap Ciora light that I use on my shrimp tanks because it's working very well on them, and it comes with a timer installed in it, and the photo periods on the light will work fine for the plants in this Betta tank. Now I am pretty good at turning the light on because the start of the photo period lines up with when I feed my fish, but I've honestly lost count of the number of times I forgot to turn the light off, and then I'll come in a couple of hours later and the light will still be on in the room, and then I'll have to turn it off. Thankfully this doesn't seem to have caused any algae issues in the tank, but I have seen people online say that inconsistent photo periods may cause problems with certain plants. As I mentioned earlier, I have had issues with the Bucephalandra Red Scorpio and the Green Gnome in here, and my Anubias did start to yellow up too, but more on that one later. So yeah, the easiest fix for this one is just to use an automated light from the start, and this is my last tank that has a manual light on it. All the other ones have been switched over to automation now. Now the next one isn't really a mistake depending on what you want to do with your tank, but I did want to include it in the video, and the issue is overplanting in this type of tank. As you can see in the video clips, there's plenty of plants in here, and most of them are epiphyte plants that are slow grown, but there's also some salvinia floating plants too. That means that all of the plants in here are pulling their nutrients from the tank's water column, but there's really not that much nutrients in here. I used an inert substrate when I set the tank up, so it's not leaking anything into the water column. And even though there are some snails and shrimp in here, the main occupant is Stitch the betta fish, so a lot of the nutrients is provided by his waste. Now betta fish really don't need to be fed much, so in turn they don't produce that much waste, and then in turn again the plants don't have much to absorb from the water column. About 2 months ago now, I did notice that some of the Anubias was starting to yellow, but the red Scorpio bucephalandra had already melted by that point, and the green gnome was already having issues with browning leaves. Anyway, I decided to start dosing 2 ml of TNC complete liquid fertilizer once per week, and it does seem to have fixed the issue, and most of the plants have picked back up. Most decent liquid fertilizers that contain both macro and micro nutrients should be able to fix any type of issue like this, but it's not something I expected during the initial setup. Personally, I don't have an issue with paying for liquid fertilizers for my planted tanks, but I know that some people don't like to do it. The usual workaround is just to feed your fish more, but with it just being a Betta in here, it's not a community tank with a lot of different fish, it's actually quite difficult to overfeed this Betta safely to get the extra waste produced. So this next one is more of a potential issue, and unfortunately I'll never know if this was an actual problem, but it's using lava rock in the tank. I am probably trying to be over analytical after Stitch got his infection, but I can't help wonder if the rougher surface on parts of the lava rock may have accidentally scratched Stitch as he swam by it and started the initial infection. Smoother rocks like Sirius stone, Hikari stone, or even large river pebbles could probably have removed this risk entirely, but I doubt I'll know for certain. I do know a couple of other people who use black lava rock in their Betta tanks without issue, and it's my favourite rock, so I have it in most of my aquariums, and I don't have this issue with my other fish. This yellow guppy did have tail rot about 2 months ago now when I successfully treated him in the same way I'm treating Stitch, and back then this guppy was in a tank with no lava rock or anything like that. Another interesting thing is that none of my other guppies in that tank got tail rot at all, so I do think sometimes it's just one of those things. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. Thanks for watching and have a good day.